Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday afternoon. Hope yours is going well. We've got another Seahawks video to get to today, but first, we just hit 2,750 subscribers to the YouTube channel. I want to give a shout out to all the subscribers, and special tip of the cap goes to the channel members, especially elite channel members Brendon, Mikel, Scott, Todd, Hasher for MVP, VGK Tiger 75, Ryguy 1218, Brendan Nelson's haircut, and Salacious Crumb. All right, today we're going to take a closer look at one of the biggest points of contention with the Seattle Seahawks so far this offseason. It's been a pretty good offseason as far as I'm concerned, and I think a lot of people are happy with the moves we've made. But there's one thing lingering that I think a lot of Seahawks fans are waiting to happen before they can declare this offseason an unequivocal success. And that is, what is going on with Carlos Dunlap? Are we bringing him back? If not, are we going to replace him with some sort of equivalent? If not, is somebody on this team capable of replacing his pass rusher number one production? That's kind of the thing that is concerning Seahawks fans right now more than anything, I think. If we don't bring back Dunlap, there are not a lot of good options left in free agency that we can bring in to replace him. And I don't think there will be very many good options to draft, especially with our relatively low amount of draft capital. So there's a lot of anxiety around bringing back Dunlap. And if you count the legal tampering period, we are now more than a week. We are now on day number 9, in effect, of free agency. And not only has Dunlap not re-signed with the Seahawks, not only has he not re-signed or signed anywhere, but it doesn't seem like there's a ton of interest in him so far. And some people are wondering why that might be. Why are the Seahawks not jumping at the bit to bring him back? Why is no team jumping at the bit to bring him in? Because he played so well last year. So let's try to answer that question and see if we can learn anything about it on the way. So let's go to Spotrac here and take a look at all the 2021 NFL free agents who play the edge, which is to say defensive end or outside linebacker. Most players on this list, especially the top ones, will be pass rushers. Near the bottom, you start to get some players who aren't really known for their ability to rush the passer, but especially at the top of this list, pretty much everybody has a calling card of being able to get to the quarterback. So I sorted it by average annual value, and we all know that there's more to a contract than the average annual value, obviously, but it's a pretty good benchmark for evaluating how valued a player was this offseason. The players who got paid in the 8 figures per year category are highly valued, and the players who got less are obviously less valued. Now, obviously, we can get into guarantees and cap hits and outs and stuff like that, but let's just take a look at AAV for a second for edge players this offseason. Okay, so if you take a look at the top 8 entries on this list, you will see what I would call the 2021 free agent upper class of edge players. These 8 players currently on your screen are the new upper class of edge. Shaquille Barrett got $17 million a year, and then you can go down the list: 16.5, 15, 15, 14, 13.6, 13, 12.3. These are the guys who have been deemed as being elite edge players, and with that, elite pass rushers. Now, if you take a look at all these players, they all have one thing in common. They are all unquestionably elite, or they have been so elite in the past that their reputation precedes any actual realities concerning how good they are at this point in their career. They are all also on the right side of 30. They are all 29 or younger in this upcoming season, with the exception of one player who I'll get to in one second here. But all of these players are great, and they know they're great. They are all valuable, and they know they're valuable. The one exception is J.J. Watt, who is arguably not the greatest player in the world anymore if you look at his numbers the last couple seasons. His injury history speaks for itself as well, and he's 32. But J.J. Watt is one of the greatest defensive players in NFL history, and he's a future Hall of Famer, and there is a tax associated with bringing in a player like that. So J.J. Watt is a bit of a special case, but these 8 represent the upper class of the 2021 free agency period for edge players. Now let's go down a little bit here and take a look at this next group of players. These are players who are making more than $5 million a year with contracts they got in this offseason, but $8 million or less. So somewhere between $5 million and $8 million, basically. And you can see this group, and we'll call this the middle class, is very small. And you would kind of think that's a little odd, right? You would think that, you'd have a few players at the very top, and then you'd have a bunch of players in the middle, and then a whole bunch of players at the bottom. But not really. There are only really 4 players in what I would call the new middle class for edge players in the NFL. Haason Reddick, Denico Autry, Samson Ebukam, and Tyus Bowser. Now, this middle class is where I think most people at this point kind of expect Carlos Dunlap to slot in, right? He's not as good as these guys anymore. He's old. He's not a future Hall of Famer, so he doesn't fit in with this upper class. He fits in much better with this middle class. But look at how small that middle class is. All right, and then after Tyus Bowser, you get down to the players who are making $5 million or less per year. So if you take a look at this list, it's very long. It starts up here with Solomon Thomas, and then it goes down through a whole bunch of players. And some of these guys are not even really pass rushers. There's like, I think Malcolm Smith is here. He's not a pass rusher. We know that firsthand. I think Henry Anderson isn't really a pass rusher. Kevin Pierre-Louis is certainly no pass rusher. So this is where you get to the players who are maybe first-round disappointments, players who are just depth, players who aren't very good but need a maybe second or third or fourth chance, etc. So you can see how big this NFL edge lower class is, right? This is a lot of players, and there are a lot of players who are probably going to join these ranks. Players who just won't get signed for maybe until right before the season or even during the season. So here's what I can say about this. And one more thing. Notice that every contract in this lower class is a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal, and they're mostly 1-year deals. So that's another sign that you're part of this lower class of edge free agents. So here's how I would put it. The upper class players are pretty simple to negotiate out. That's why there are currently 8 of them. And I don't think we're going to get too many more, maybe one more, but this is the upper class. And the thing with these players is these players know that they're great. And the teams that can sign them know that they're great. And both sides know that the other side knows that they're great. So there's an understanding that you're going to have to pay out the nose to get them. And I think that this creates a scenario where it's very easy for these players and teams to negotiate. Okay, you're going to get a lot of money, we know it. We're going to give you a lot of money, we know it. Let's just start somewhere. We're going to be pretty close to each other, and we can quickly get down to a reasonable cost that we're both willing to accept, and we can just go from there. So you have this pretty fat upper class. The lower class is similarly easy because these players, they know they're not very good. In some cases, they know they're not good at all. They know they're not valued. The teams that can sign them know that they're not very good and not very valued. So it's very easy for these players and teams to come to an agreement. A guy like Solomon Thomas, who is a first-round bust. Takaris McKinley, another first-round bust. Kevin Pierre-Louis, who is a career backup. Jordan Jenkins, who is just a decent depth player who put up decent stats on a terrible team last year. These guys, they know they don't have much to bring to the negotiating table. They know the teams know it, so they just want to get a contract done so they can stay in the NFL most of the time. So they when they go to the negotiating table, they start in a similar place, and they quickly get to a middle ground that both sides can agree with. So those areas of the free agency class get filled out fast. But you have this middle class that even after now 9 days is just not getting filled out very quickly. And I think that's because these players and teams, and the teams who signed them, start out in much different areas. A guy like Haason Reddick had a great year last year. He finally moved to his natural position, and he had 12 and a half sacks and was one of the better pass rushers in the league. He had a really nice season. So he probably thinks, oh, I should get paid like the upper class. I'm as good as Yannick Ngakoue. I'm as good as Matthew Judon. I'm as good as Carl Lawson. But the teams look at him and go, you've had one good season, and until then you were considered a pretty fat disappointment. 5 of your 12 and a half sacks came in one game. We're not going to give you that big money. So players like this kind of start up here, and then the teams that want to sign them start down here, and it takes them a while to get to the middle. And I think that's what happens with these middle ground players. They know that they're better than the guys down here, so they want to get paid like the guys up here. But the teams know they're not as good as these guys up here, and in many cases they're also much older. So they start down here. So my theory would be that a player like Carlos Dunlap is not getting signed after 9 days of free agency in effect because he is starting up here. He thinks, he's looking at this and going, hey, I'm better than J.J. Watt at this point in our careers. I'm just as good as Yannick Ngakoue. I don't care that I'm 6 years older. I'm as good as Yannick Ngakoue. I'm as valuable as Romeo Okwara. So he starts in a ridiculous negotiating position. He's trying to get 12 mil plus a year. And the team looks at him and goes, well, you're really old. You're 32 years old. The last team you were on gave you away for basically nothing. So we're looking at you more like in the, lower class range, maybe the lower middle class, but we're far away. And I think that's what's taking so long with some of these players. So if you take a look at the current middle class, you will only see one player who really has a decent comp to Carlos Dunlap. Reddick doesn't make a lot of sense because he's basically been a bust until he had one big year. Ebukam is not really a pass rusher. He's never had more than 5 sacks in a season. Bowser is a okay pass rusher. He had 5 sacks 1 year, but he's not really the kind of pass rusher that Dunlap has proven to be. So if you want to compare Dunlap to somebody here, it would probably be Denico Autry. And he signed with the Titans 3 years, $21.5 million, so just under $7.2 million per season, basically. And he got a pretty nice contract. His age is similar. He's going to be 31 this year. Dunlap's going to be 32. And if you take a look at some of the stats, let's go to Dunlap's PFF page, PFR page. Scroll down. You can look at the advanced stats. Last year, he had 5 sacks and 18 pressures in 8 games with Seattle. So over a full season, probably would have had about 10 with 35 or 36 pressures. Average it all out. So that's pretty good. If you go to Denico Autry's PFR page and go down to his advanced stats, he played 14 games, had 7.5 sacks and 22 pressures. If he played a full season, probably would have been about 8.5 sacks, maybe 9, and 25, 26 pressures. So Dunlap can make a reasonable case that he's a little better and a little bit of a more valuable pass rusher than Denico Autry because that's what these players are valued for. So from my perspective, it should be pretty simple to pin Carlos Dunlap's new contract. Call it 3 years, 23 to 24 million. So about 8 million per. Give him a little bit more because he's better than Autry. Give him with a little bit of a penalty there because he's 1 year older, which is significant. So it seems pretty clear to me that the contract that Dunlap is eventually going to settle on is somewhere around 3 years, 23 million. But I don't think he's there yet. I think he's still looking at this as I can be J.J. Watt, and that's the holdup here. But I heavily suspect that when this is all over, Dunlap will sign with somebody for about the Denico Autry type of contract. Hopefully it'll be with us. I have a good feeling it'll be with us. But if I had to guess why Dunlap hasn't really been attracting interest yet or hasn't been in tight discussions with anybody yet and the Seahawks haven't brought him back in yet, this would be why. Keep an eye out in the coming days for him to maybe come back down to earth a little bit and get a little closer to the kind of deal that a team might be willing to give him. Maybe even a little less. 32-year-olds, if you look at this list of edges who have signed, you will notice the only player who is 32 years old who signed a new contract are J.J. Watt, who is cut from a different cloth, and Malcolm Smith, who has no real comparison. A lot of the players who are on Dunlap's age level, as you can see, Melvin Ingram, Justin Houston, Ryan Kerrigan, Tyrone Crawford, KJ Wright, Everson Griffin. A lot of these guys haven't signed yet because age is a big deal. It's common sense, right? You don't want to be paying an old player a massive contract. So keep watching the wires. Something will happen, and I think we know the approximate value of the contract when it happens. But that would be my guess as to why he hasn't signed yet. We'll see what happens. I'm going to get out of here. Peace out. Go Hawks. Stream tonight. Don't know 100% what I'm going to be streaming, but I will be streaming something. If something happens, you will see more videos from me today. But that's going to do it. Peace out. Go Hawks. See you guys tonight.